Good evening and welcome to the show. This is the First Amendment, historically speaking, and I will be your host. I am Brother Frederick Douglass Dixon, and as always, I have to give abundant gratitude to UPTV and their entire staff for allowing us to come through this venue and forward what we feel is esoteric information that will hopefully spark a seed of thought in a household, spark a seed of thought through the community, and also things that will change one's reality. So indeed, I would like to thank young brother Yusef, who helps me so much, as well as the entire staff. Today, I'd like to go into what we consider to be holding that thought from what we said earlier about esoteric information, is to discuss someone who not a lot of people pay attention to or may not know in a historical setting. And we'll get to it right away. And I think the words of this particular person will make sure that the words are not only sufficient, but they are indeed setting the pace for intelligent thought and dialogue, which will allow us to look at ourselves a bit more seriously and understand that we've had intelligent people of fortitude since we have entered the wilderness of North America. So today will be a historical throwback, if you will, especially for those of us who've never had the chance to listen to this person or even know this person. It is indeed our duty to keep that thought alive. So I just start off with the quote. When I cast my eyes on a long list of illustrious names that are enrolled on the bright annals of fame amongst whites, I turn my eyes within and I ask my thoughts, where are the names of our illustrious ones? Now, if we were to hear that specific quote and ask one person, or ask a group of people, who said that? These are strong words. I want to read them again so that no one has gone without understanding how powerful these words are. When I cast my eyes on the long list of illustrious names that are enrolled on the bright annals of fame amongst whites, I turn my eyes within and I ask my thoughts, where are the names of our illustrious ones? Now, if we think about who would have said that, well, lots of people come to mind to me who could have made that claim with such fortitude and sincerity. And one name that comes to mind is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. These are words that sound as they would come from Dr. Martin Luther King. Also, if you listen to what was said, there was a question being posed. And the question was, when we look across the histories and the annal of what have been written, where are those who look like me? Where are those who are of color? Where are the blacks in history who have done amazing things? Because as this quote says, when you think about it, the history reveals only one particular group that has attained feats that are worthy of mentioning. Now, for all you young ladies, this quote is a quote by Mariah Stewart. Mariah Stewart was born in 1803. So if we get to Mariah Stewart and we understand her worth, yes, for you young ladies who are watching, you do have heroes who are not on MTV, that are not on Real Housewives of Atlanta. We do have heroes, and these particular thoughts come from someone who is worthy of our research with humorless fervor. So for you young ladies, you all who are in grammar school, you all who are in high school, and those of us who are adults by age, 18 and above, we should definitely pay attention to Mariah Stewart. Now, given a background on Mariah Stewart, then if it's proper, we need to start at the beginning. Now, with Mariah Stewart, she was a counterpart of David Walker. If any of us know anything about David Walker was indeed another figure that has been lessened and marginalized in his importance in history. David Walker wrote an appeal to the colored citizens of the world in 1829 in Boston. And this was one of the people that he befriended, and became a counterpart. So Mariah Stewart is one of those people who for years and years and years had been written out of history. And the reason why is because she showed so much fortitude that she called on men to be men, black men to be men, and do as men do. And one of the quotes that I'll recite to you is she said, "Fateful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful." She was a speaker, born 1803. She became a public speaker, but for a long time she worked as a domestic. She was a teacher, a journalist, an abolitionist without question, and one who fought for women's rights in the early 1800s. And she's one of the first well-known female black lecturers, abolitionist, anti-slave rebellion that the world has seen in the wilderness of North America. So if we tie her to David Walker and the importance of David Walker, he understood her brilliance. She lived in Boston. She lived in New York. She lived in Washington, D.C. Was considered to be as fiery of a orator and as candid as an orator and gifted as an orator as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. And if we talk about Malcolm X, then we understand Malcolm X had a teacher. So with the teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, I would like for you all to understand that these are the thoughts that have been going on for hundreds of years amongst the rank and files of those black intellectuals and those who are not intellectuals with the fortitude of soldiers to make a presence and leave a shedding moment, leaving what we call a footprint in the sand. And we need to make sure that we give them their just due. And I say without hesitation, this is one person that we can't get around. So David Walker's appeal, 1829, caused so much stir that it became outlawed in some states. Now, he had a way of putting words, but not quite like Mariah Stewart. Not quite the same way as coming from a young lady in 1833. Now, these are very tumultuous times, and although she was a free person living in Boston, Boston had been known for years for how prejudiced that particular place was, as well as its hypocrisy of being a haven for runaway slaves. So she lived in that time, but she spoke in a time that is ubiquitously undeniable. So it's a classic. The way that she speaks is a classic. And for us to understand what a classic is, a functional definition of a classic is what she said then, Mariah Stewart, is as important today as when she said it. So Mariah Stewart, one of our greatest, and I let her words speak for herself. We have been imposed upon, insulted, and derived on every side. And now, if we complain, it is considered as the height of impertinence. We have suffered ourselves to be considered as dastards, cowards, mean, faint-hearted, wretches. And on this account, not because of our complexion, many despise of us and would gladly spurn us from their presence. So, when we see the fortitude of Sojourner Truth, when we see the fortitude of Harriet Tubman, then we understand that these women were indeed the most brilliant, the strongest, and those who had the most strength towards abolition. When we talk about those women, then we have to understand the presence of the woman. And today, when we look at our Black Lives Matter, when we look at our going backwards, civil rights, then to understand any movement or to understand America and to understand blacks in America, the first person we have to look to is the black woman. If we understand that if it had not been for the black woman, then we would have never made it out of what we know as the hells and the bowels of the transatlantic slave trade. Absolutely not. So when we are very serious about raising our young ladies, then they need to be able to see these young ladies. And if you can't see them, it's always good to hear them. So a wise man once said, to gauge any nation's civilization, look no further than its woman. He also said on page 58 and 59 of The Black Man, the message to the black man in America, elevate and protect the black woman. How do we understand how important it is to understand Mariah Stewart if we don't understand how important it is to raise our young ladies to be magnificent and allow their aspirations and inspirations to further the nation, to further the country, and more so to further the household, which is the number one fundamental unit of our society. So when we talk about Mariah Stewart, we're talking about someone who looks just like you, young lady. If you're 11, 12, 13, or if you're 80, from 8 to 80, she understood you. She left her words behind. I want to pay homage and use more of her words to fend for themselves. Now, obviously, she was one who understood the wretchedness of the transatlantic slave trade. She was obviously one who could forward it in an educational manner that was not only accepted, never probably amenable to white America, but her fortitude did not allow for her to step down. So she also goes on to say, we have pursued the shadow. They have obtained the substance. We have performed the labor. They have received the profits. We have planted the vines. They have eaten the fruits of them. Who is she talking about? She's talking about white men. Now, how do we look at the 1800s, the 1900s, and now where we are in 2020? How do we look at those who control our society? Well, now the changing of guard is taking place. And yes, we are building a new world, but there are still remnants of the transatlantic slave trade in the actions, the attitudes, and the behaviors of white men. How do we tie this along? Well, I think one person that removes the hypocrisy of America being a post-racial society will be Donald Trump. Indeed, he is allowing for everyone to understand the worth of black lives. Now, he's a politician as now, but he is a businessman. And what he feels about blacks is ultimately coming out every time he opens his mouth. It's just a part of him that he can't get rid of. So Mariah Stewart in 1833, she says, I would ask, is it blindness of mind or stupidity of soul or the want of education who have charged our young men to never have their voices be heard on behalf of their race, nor have their hands raised on behalf of their race? Is it for the fear of offending whites, which we are taught since our earliest infancy? Now, if we listen to her words in 1833, imagine what she went through. Imagine the hell she caught. Now, if you go back to her counterpart, David Walker, in this very famous appeal, 1829, David Walker is dead by 1831. And she is literally leaving Boston to go to New York. Why? Her life's in danger. She goes from New York to Washington, D.C. Why? It's because she understood what happened to her counterpart. But that did not stop her. In fact, there was a movement to silence her. And that's why you don't find so many of her writings after 1833. Because she was uncompromising about how her thoughts would be left behind for young ladies now. How it would sound to you when you hear someone who has the understanding and the will to not back down. Well, we want to make sure that we cultivate and raise another generation of Mariah Stewarts. So you saw Mariah Stewart when you saw Kathleen Cleaver. You saw Mariah Stewart when you saw the doctor, Betty Shabazz. You saw Mariah Stewart in Angela Davis. You saw these people and you see them today. As I know some of the best way to say it, you all, every time we see someone with these same characteristics, we must make sure that potential delay does not become potential denied. So we have a way of silencing our young ladies and placing them in boxes. When at this time, Mariah Stewart was one of the only voices that was speaking in a manner that was unapologetically black, historically accurate, and as intelligent as one could be. What more can you ask of one woman? What more can we ask of our women? Well, again, we go back to what a wise man says. If you gauge a nation's civilization, look no further than a woman. Where you will find no decent women, you will find no decent men. It is so very important that our next generation understand who Mariah Stewart is, understand her worth, listen to her words, and understood that she knew, because of her connection to Almighty God, that somehow her words would live forever. Now, I don't call myself one who has that kind of vision to connect to things that I can't see. But I do understand my duty. And my duty is to make sure that you get this information. Now, what you do with it at this point, that is of nothing that I can control. But it is a portion of me that would love for you young ladies who are mothers to begin to talk about these women that we've mentioned, just to be able to understand your own worth. And make sure that your daughters understand that when they watch TV and they find things that are hilarious and amusing that pour to the demise of their character, then we have to step in. Lots of folks, well, it's just TV. No, it's playing a huge role on how they look at life. It is indeed playing a monstrous role on how they will behave, how they will look at men, how they will look at their own prospects of opportunities, how they will look at themselves, and how they'll deal with the opposite sex. So I understand at this small time that we have, just to mention Mariah Stewart, somebody out there is understanding that maybe I want to look Mariah Stewart up. A simple Google search will do it. I don't want you to ever take time from your busy life for meaningless things. This is very meaningful. If you could have a conversation just about what you read through Wikipedia, which is not the most intelligent way to gather your information, but if that's the only way you can get it, then allow us to help you with that. Allow us to shape you with that. I'll go back to her words when she talks about the idea of what we should do to pull our resources together and become a collective family. She says this about money. Let our money, instead of being thrown away as heretofore, be appropriated for schools and seminaries of learning for our children and youth. We ought to follow the example of whites in this respect. Nothing could raise our respectability, add to our peace and happiness, and reflect so much honor upon us as to be ourselves the promoters of temperance and the supporters, as far as we are able, of useful and scientific knowledge. Well, there we are. 1800s, the early 1800s, she's saying the science of knowledge. Well, the word science comes from the root word seal, which means to know. That means we can test and test and test and test again and get the exact same answer. Scientific. And when we think about what's scientific in the world, H2O, that's water. One hydrogen, two oxygens. That's scientific. There are 196,940,000 square miles on the planet Earth, with the circumference 24,896 miles. There are also the diameter 7,926 miles, 93 million miles from the sun to the earth, which rotates 1,037 and 1/3 degree per hour. Yes, we understand that this is scientific. So she's saying the science of knowledge for you to know, not for you not to know, because there's absolutely no value in misunderstanding. So today we wanted to make sure that this name came across your household, that this name was put in the back of your mind, that this name you can go and research, that this name should be held in the highest regards because of what she's already given. That's her life. How do we understand our women of the day? Then look at the women of the past to be able to sculpt and mold these young ladies of the future. I have to say, there's far more and no group that is more worthy than our protection, than our own sisters. Well, think about it this way. Our black young ladies, as we know in the wilderness of North America, are those who are the least protected. Now, you won't find a lot of other nationalities that doesn't protect their women until their death. But somehow, because of what we've been through here in America, that we are not of ourselves and the leading destructors and leading participants in our own demise. So the old folks would say, when you were acting out, when you were acting badly, they would ask a question. What's gotten into you? Well, we know right now the enemy has gotten into us because now we have the names from our slave masters. We also have the holidays of our slave masters. We also have the thought pattern of our slave masters. And when we talk about slavery now, then we don't think of the fetters of physical slavery. We think about the mentality of those who have been through 500 years of domination, European culture, so-called culture. So Mariah Stewart, we have to let our young people know, which means that us who are of age, no matter how young you relatively feel, it is your duty. And it is our duty. And I take this very seriously to make sure that you hear this. I want to go back to her words. And she makes clear sense here. The rays of light and knowledge have been hid from our view. We have been taught to consider ourselves as scarce superior to the brute creation. We have performed the most laborious parts of American drudgery. Had we as people received 1/2 of the early advantages the whites have received, I would defy the government of the United States to deprive us any longer of our rights. She's charging the government in 1833. She's charging the black man in 1833. She is indeed using words that you would tie to probably Brother Malcolm. Again, Malcolm had a teacher. I can only say to you that it means everything. And I'm willing to give my life. And believe you me, as I stand before you, I'm not a damn fool. But what I am is concerned, highly concerned about how these young ladies right now feel about themselves and what they think is important. Food, clothing, shelter, and safety is what we need. We have to begin to understand that the mindset is the most important. And yes, the youngest is the most important in that thought. So how do I praise Mariah Stewart any further? Well, I say to you all, be sure to never let her thoughts diminish. I'm sure that there are other people that you look to, because every time we turn on the TV under these election years, we see Hillary Clinton. Yes, we do. And I think that it is time for someone other than a white man to be a president. That's been proven. Are we going to have our first female president? Perhaps. So the question is, when will we have our first black female president? Oh yes, it's coming. And it will also look just like Mariah Stewart because she was there first. She will be the first lady no matter when the first lady becomes the first president. Her thoughts will indeed extend and open up thoughts. I know something that we read to you made a little sense. I did my best to read it in my best Mariah Stewart voice. I wanted you to understand how she would have said this. Now, please understand the importance of this topic. Please allow these thoughts to fester and multiply in your home, as you will begin to see an immediate change in how our young ladies think about themselves, which in turn will have a corresponding change and transformation in how they act. So again, just to discuss Mariah Stewart isn't enough. But it is a start. It is some place that we can say, yeah, well, you know, I heard that name before. You know, I've heard some of the words that she's spoken. Then we have clearly used the light of understanding under the searchlight of truth to bring about a change in our community. I say wholeheartedly that I'm honored to be able to forward you this information. And I don't understand what we would do as a group of people without people just like Mariah Stewart. I know sometimes we think that it's all bad. Joy comes in the morning, but we have to do much more than just pray. We have to pray. Yes, that's important, but we need to be working while we're praying. I say, without any hesitation, that today was so near and dear to me. I'm just so glad that you took the time to understand the importance and share this small time that we have. Mariah Stewart, we could ask no more of you. Almighty God is pleased. We thank you for each and every act of revolt. We thank you for each and every thought which still permeates and each and every act of kindness. You are served us well without question. Ladies and gentlemen, this information may in no means change your mind, but because truth and you are so important to me, I just thought you ought to know. I remain with esteem and respect, a distinguished man of color, Brother Frederick Douglass Dixon. Thank you.